Welcome to the Bowhunter Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Now, here's your host, editor Christian Berg.
All right, welcome back to the Bowhunter Podcast. We are all bow hunting all the time, and today I'm not really sure how to feel. Deer seasons are just on the cusp of opening in a lot of places, and excitement is high. But at the same time, in some areas, there's a lot of concern out there because we have got some serious outbreaks of EHD, and it's taking a real toll on whitetails and especially some big bucks. And gosh, if you've ever been there and you've seen what EHD can do on a localized level, it's kind of depressing. So I guess today, that's where we're at. Some bad news, but it's a big deal. It's been like blowing up my social media feeds the last couple weeks. And actually, one of our good friends here at Bowhunter, Emily Konkler from Ohio, lives in an area where it's really getting hammered. And I was like, I wonder if Emily would be willing to come on the show. And here she is. Emily, gosh, I wish we were welcoming you back to the podcast under better circumstances.
Right? Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's pretty rough here. Honestly, these few counties down here in Southeast Ohio is it's getting hit the worst. The amount of deer numbers that's been recorded down here is the record amount in the history of Ohio for an EHD outbreak. So it's pretty ugly down here right now.
Now, what county are you in?
Morgan, Washington is where my properties are.
All right. So I have a lot of questions for you. I want to get deeper into that. And just before we do, I want to introduce our other guest, and that's Zach Haas. And Zach is an aquatic biologist and also the inventor of a new tool in the fight against EHD called EHD-fense. And so I'm excited to talk to you about everything that you've been doing too. And I have to imagine, Zach, just as a sort of opening thought, you must be getting an incredible amount of interest in EHD-fense right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as these different states are getting hammered, we are seeing crazy amount of inflow. People saying, what is this product? What can I do? How can I fix my ponds? How can I fix my creeks?" Pretty much everyone's in stage 5 emergency right now, trying to figure out how they fix it. And that's where honestly I'm trying to give my aquatic biology background and experience to help to fix this fight we have.
Okay, so a lot to unpack here, folks. I think this is going to be honestly an extremely interesting and educational episode. But let's start with this, Emily. I want to go back to you because you mentioned it, and I wanted to dive right in, but I needed to get Zach introduced. Like you said, record numbers. I mean, what are we talking about here in terms of how many deer are dying, and like how do they even go about trying to quantify this?
I don't know the exact numbers because the DNR maps they only go to like the color slotches of like over 50 found dead, and I think it kind of breaks it down per like township or something there. And I mean, most of this area, Morgan, Washington, Athens, and into Noble, and even around now, it's literally the darkest red that you can have, which is all over 50 recorded. What those actual numbers are, I'm not 100%. I know I did speak with Mike Rex from down in Athens County, and he said it was the highest recorded amount of sick and dead deer from this that they've ever had in history. But yeah, I don't know what the numbers are. I probably don't want to know what the numbers are because I mean, just around here with the neighbors, I mean, there's been hundreds found just literally here. So I can only imagine everywhere else.
Well, and what about you personally? Like I know that you own some ground where you hunt and you have permission on some other properties not too far from your home there. Have you actually gone and put your boots on and gone and walked some creek bottoms and some pond banks and things like that? Or are you documenting actual, dead deer there and individual bucks and things like that?
Yeah, so I've done a little bit of walking on my own personal farm. I have not done any walking just because the vegetation and stuff is so thick right now that it's not really worth it to get infested with ticks and mosquitoes to try to get through some of these areas. So unfortunately, I won't really see the aftermath until probably shed season or, once the vegetation and stuff dies there. But locally here where my house is, it's a lot easier to walk and a lot less thick vegetation. And I've just myself, I mean, I've found probably around like 20, and I really haven't gone very far at all. I mean, I'd say in the one right here at my house, we're down 80-85% or more. That's how many has been killed. There's really nothing left. I have a fawn and like a couple young does, and that's it. I mean, you don't see any deer in the fields. I found bucks. All my target bucks are dead. I mean, there's just nothing left at all. And I know on my personal farm, the next county over, I had the first case July 14th on that farm. And the game warden had to come and take care of that deer and everything there. But down in Athens County, this all started in the middle of June, which is the earliest that they have ever seen it. And we have had a ton of rain this spring and summer as well, especially June and July. So it's pretty wild kind of how it's all playing out, really.
So you're basically telling me that in areas, because like guys, it's Ohio. For everyone who's listening, we're talking about Ohio, right? Everybody knows how good Ohio is. Ohio not only produces a lot of big mature bucks, but it it has a high deer density. So I mean, you're used to, like Emily, a typical camera that you have out. Let's say you have a feeder or some minerals or whatever. You're probably used to seeing, if you're going to count all the does and fawns, even if it's a lot of the same deer that come back a couple times a day. I mean, you're going to get dozens or hundreds of pictures a day from your cameras. Are you telling me you're now at a point where you're literally getting a handful of pictures a day, or maybe not even that?
Yes. Yeah, I'm seeing more coon, more turkey than I am deer. So
Which is, it's crazy.
anything. Yeah. It's pretty wild.
And I mean, like I've seen it, the worst I ever saw. And just to give people like an idea of the devastation that EHD can have in a very short period of time, the worst I ever saw was out in southeast Montana, where I have hunted many times, along a river bottom that really, I mean, the whitetails get very concentrated. They live, on those ranches. They kind of hang along the river where the ag is, and that was an area where you would hunt and you would see 50 to 100 deer a day easily, to literally going to where you hardly saw a deer. And so that is, we're talking about thousands and thousands of whitetails that probably died in a relatively small number of square miles. And that's what EHD can do. So let's let's move a little bit more towards the educational side. Zach, obviously Emily is going to take a moment here and cry in her iced tea or whatever there and try to collect herself to go on, because I mean it is depressing, right, Zach? It's depressing.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, when I'm even hearing the reports, and obviously that's where like Emily's located, when people are driving down the roads and literally can smell the death just driving on roads. And that's, and to me, to not see anything being done, and obviously that's where I've kind of come into it, but nothing's being done by any of the agencies. I mean, I actually just saw Ohio was doing a CWD talk rather than an EHD talk, and that's mind blowing to me when that's not the problem right now. I mean, so when we look into it, and I can obviously, however you want me to do it with the biology side, but EHD used to not be a big issue, right? I mean, first case was in 1965, and that was in New Jersey. And the next case was like in 1970 something, and it just slowly it was just an anomaly at that point, kind of in a way like I'll say CWD can be. But with that said, as we progressed and we got into like my biggest recollection was 2012 when we had a big wipeout in Iowa Missouri. The Dakotas got hit really bad. But then it started getting where instead of a 10, 15-year gap, we were starting to see 3 to 5 year gaps. And now we're seeing every year. Now it's an annual problem. Like Ohio got smashed last year too. And I talked to some people about that even last year. So now it's just pretty much populating around the different states and moving around. But like in Emily's case, when you're dealing with 80, 85% mortality, it's taken you 5 to 10 years to rebuild that deer herd. It's not a, well, next year it's great. No, if you only have does and fawns, well, it's going to take that much longer to ever rebuild that herd. And then if you get hit annually, before you know it, the whole resource is gone. So that's when we got to really step up to the plate here and start fixing our problem.
Yeah, and let's just give people a real quick background. EHD, it's epizootic hemorrhagic disease. It's a viral infection. It causes extremely high fever, leads to internal bleeding. These deer will bleed out on the brain and other organs. Oftentimes can die within 48 to 72 hours of the infection setting in. And the reason that they're typically found along the creeks, the rivers, the ponds, etc., is because they get very thirsty with that high fever and they go there and then they just get too weak. They can't move. Then you got all those carcasses concentrated along those water sources. And as far as the transmission, Zach, it's EHD is spread by these biting midges, these little like no-see-ums or whatever gnats, whatever you want to call them. They're these bugs and they breed in the muddy, mucky water that's along the edge of these water sources. And if you think about the conditions, Emily, I think, touched on it earlier. We had a wet spring, wet early summer, and then it's been really dry for like the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, as we've seen this outbreak continue to intensify. And as think about what happens when it gets dry, right? Your creek banks drop, your river banks drop, your ponds shrink, and you get all this exposed mud. So every day, every week, right, as that water level drops, what's happening? You're exposing like a new strip of mud along the edges of those banks, and that's the perfect breeding environment for these midges. They're breeding there. There's new insects that are hatching, and the deer are also getting more concentrated because the water sources are fewer. So if there was 5 water sources on a property, now maybe there's only 1 or 2. So now all the deer are going to those 1 or 2 spots. The midge activity is increasing right as the deer activity is increasing, and you just created this perfect storm that these midges now that carry this virus are exposed with the deer. And actually the studies are really interesting as to how infectious this is. I think it might have been some of the maybe the information you put out, Zach, like just a single bite from a midge has a high probability of infecting an animal. And when you think about going out into the woods where there's a lot of mosquitoes, what are the odds that you don't get one mosquito bite, right? So like these poor deer, they don't really stand much of a chance, Zach.
100%. I mean, so yeah, when you really look into it, the other issue we're seeing now is also when the midge goes away. So very similar to a mosquito, we need a first killing frost to actually make them go dormant and go away for the year. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that first killing frost till way later in the year. So I'm even talking to property owners now that are seeing EHD mortality happening in October, happening in November. They're lasting a lot longer too. But when you come to transmission, a lot of the issues too is not to prey on farmers, but it's changes in our agricultural practice. So dairy farming's going to the wayside. So everyone's beef, getting more beef cattle and all this stuff. So you need pasture and grazing ground. Well, cattle is one of your number one vectors of the disease, or carriers of disease. So the midge goes and bites the cattle that's been into the gross cattle pond. That deer goes to that same pond, gets bit. So that's becoming one of our biggest issues, actually, is the cattle being near deer because that transmission is occurring. It's actually very similar to how swimmer's itch happens, actually, because it's an interaction between the snail and a duck. And that same interaction is happening between the cattle, the deer, and the midge, the Culicodes midge. So what we need to do, though, is, and over time, but through all my research and study, is that midge wants that gross stagnant water, which we're seeing because of a drought condition right now. And other part of it is, depending on the state you're in, it's also based on how well our predatory hatch was. And a lot of times I'm talking about dragonflies. So like in our state here in Wisconsin, we had a beautiful dragonfly hatch. We barely have any mosquitoes. All our bug populations are down. Like, we actually have it work. Well, if you're in an area that didn't have a good hatch, you don't have the predator and the food chain's not in place. So the same goes with the midge. If we had a super wet spring that flushed out all these systems and you didn't have a good predatory hatch, well, now what's going to actually kill the midge? Nothing. So then it takes over, just like the rabbits did in Australia, because there wasn't no primary predator. So that's when we have to start looking at the water systems or ecosystems, whether it's restoration of creeks, rivers, ponds, but we got to start actually looking at the problem right away out of the gate. And I'm saying in the spring. I mean, yeah, it's later right now. We can still do some things to fix it, but this is something that we need to start focusing on right out of the gate after winter.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background, Zach. I mean, what is your background in aquatic biology? How do you even, know about all this stuff? And then I'm assuming from all those giant mountain of antlers in the background that you're also an avid deer hunter. And so, how did it all come together to, maybe want to put something together to give us a tool in this fight against EHD?
So by trade, I was an aquatic biologist for nearly 20 years. So I went to school at the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, which is one of the probably the top natural resource schools in the nation right now. And I went for biology and water resource management. So through my studies there, I mean, I learned about entomology, zoology, biology, botany, you name it. I mean, every biology class I could take, I took it, but with a focus and emphasis of aquatics. So with that said, I took that degree, and then I actually became a biologist at a private pond and lake management company here in Wisconsin, where I managed, I mean, well over 3,000 different water bodies, varying from the small wildlife ponds up to 2,000 plus acre lakes. And if there's a problem that you can visualize in your head, I probably seen it and I probably fixed it. So that was my career. I mean, in and out for 20 years. But when I first started and I got to college, I did what every college kid should do. Just kidding. Is I took my first paycheck and I got a Missouri lease to deer hunt. And that year I used that, what I could have probably paid off student loans with, but I didn't. Is I took that, got this lease, I was all pumped, had all these big deer, and all the big deer except for one died. They were gone. Well, it turns out at the time no one talked about EHD. And so I was the research director at the time at the company. So I'm thinking, okay, well, this impacted me in my pocketbook. So I'm going to start figuring out why EHD. Well, at the time, once again, we didn't talk about EHD, but what did we talk about or hear about? Blue tongue. We heard a lot about blue tongue back then. And so I started reaching out to all the professors in Montana State, Colorado State, Wyoming State, because I'm thinking, all right, I need to get to the nitty gritty of this midge issue. Why is it, getting worse?
Just interrupt you real quick. Is blue tongue and EHD the same thing or different viruses, Zach?
So they're both a hemorrhagic disease, and they're both carried actually by the Culicodes midge, but they are a different variant of the virus. So they were so used interchangeably for so long until we started really realizing that it's a different virus, just the carrier is the same. Which, so to me, it always goes back to that carrier, right? Like, we have all these EHD variants even out there right now, but they're still carried by the Culicodes midge, the no-see-um midge, and so that's where our focus has to be. So, anyways, yeah, like, kind of go back to where I am today with this is reaching out to those professors, talk to my old professors, talk to some professors at UW Madison, because I wanted to figure out what makes this thing explode. And like I said, this was before a lot of these states didn't even know what EHD was yet. Well, it all came back to a couple things. One was impaired water sources. The midge loved to having super impaired water sources because its predatory invertebrates and insects weren't present. So it could thrive. It had no predators. It could do whatever it wanted. Other thing is it survived in high salinity. Also, when you think cattle ponds, for instance, a lot of times what's next to it, a 50-pound brine salt block. Well, that goes in there, it kills off the ecosystem, but the midge. So that's actually why I'm also not a fan with some additives people can put into the water, because you don't want to kill the ecosystem. Then also kind of going into it a little further, then when I started thinking, okay, the mud flats. All right. I always laugh, and when in my seminars, I always ask people, well, when was mud created? Well, it was when God put it on this planet. It's not just mud. No, it's having high organics in that muck. So when you have agriculture runoff issues, you're not doing buffering strips with CRP ground. You're not properly restoring a stream with bends and eddies and all these different things. No aquatic plants. So now I took that whole concept of, okay, like bad water, salinity, doesn't want predators near it. All right, how can we improve that? Well, and then just through taking care of my own clients' ponds, my light bulb went on when I had clients start telling me after I would do the treatments. So, I mean, I was doing algae and weed treatments as a commercial applicator, but then I started doing different beneficial additives, bacterias, enzymes, flocculants. And suddenly they started going, ever since you start taking care of the pond, we don't get bit by mosquitoes really anymore. And I went, huh, bingo. Because mosquitoes' whole life cycle is in the water, period. But the midge still is interacting. It's semi-aquatic. It's not fully aquatic, but semi-aquatic. So it still needs that water source. All right, so if we're getting rid of mosquito issues and other, little black flies and gnats and all these different things that were biting people when they're swimming, all right, I'm onto something there. So I started to take my own deer ponds then and started to add the products that are in EHD-fense. And it's something I wasn't seeing bugs on my deer's heads, their faces. I mean, and generally they were looking healthier, using my water even more so. But then what really made me pumped, and this is why I'm a water nerd, is I started seeing bugs in my water. So I was seeing scavenger beetles, water boatmen. I was seeing dragonflies flying around my ponds. I was seeing frogs up the yin yang. Well, you're talking, these are all predators. So my ponds were flourishing with the predator. I mean, think about like Wisconsin northern deer herd, bunch of wolves, all the deer population's gone. That's to say the deer population, this story is the midge, and the wolf are the dragonflies. Now we have all these predators, and we just flip-flop the food chain, where now it's a predator world and not a prey world, which is the midge. So that's where I started taking care of these ponds and starting to have the ponds we took care of never having a dead deer. I mean, I had spots in Wisconsin that were getting riddled with EHD in some years, but the properties we treated, they're like, yeah, I didn't find any of the deer. My deer survived. They did well. So that's where it all came about then, where we are today with the EHD-fense product.
Well, and I want to get into more of that, but I really want to ask sort of the $1,000,000 question. You just touched on it, but let's face it, everybody's a skeptic. And I'm no different. Emily's probably no different. Like, we're thinking, okay, you're telling me, Zach, that I have this entire county, right? I'm in this entire county in Ohio, and there's deer dying everywhere, which means pretty much not only my property, but my neighbor's property and their neighbor's property and every other property within 5 square miles of my farm is got midges carrying this EHD virus, and you want to sell me a product to put in my ponds or whatever, and it's going to protect my deer. You're telling me that no midges are going to fly in from the neighbors. Is that like, I don't know, like, why should, like, tell me about the data, or like, how does that work? It seems too good to be true, man.
Well, so first and foremost, midges are not good flyers. That's one thing people don't realize. They actually do not fly well. So they're not flying from property to property. What they're actually doing is following the airstreams. So when we do have those, which unfortunately our winds are getting worse too. I feel like every single year we're getting windier days. That's the main way they're blowing around. But ultimately, it's the water improvement side, because I've heard the question a lot, right? I can't treat all the water in an area. I can't take care of all this creek system. Can't take care of all this stuff. You're right, 100%. We can't treat every single thing. But as conservationists and hunters, to me, like, I'm going to always take care of my properties, because if I have a big deer and I want to hunt it, I'm going to make sure he has everything at his grasp. And also what people, sometimes forget is during these months, deer are not that, they're not going on excursions like they do during the seeking phase in the rut. They're not. I mean, the deer I'm hunting right now, for instance, I would almost bet you $1,000 that he's staying in about 5 acres. That deer's not leaving that spot. He has his food, he has his quality water, he has his bedding. So that's where, like, just the product obviously is one part of it, is pond maintenance. That's what it is. It's preventative maintenance of your ponds. No different than you take care of your food plots. No different than you take care of your invasive buckthorn that's in your property. This is all part of the maintenance that we actually skipped because everyone got so excited about water, and they forgot that it's a living, breathing organism. And you go into it, and so even with these deer, let's say a deer has a slight immunity to EHD, right? But then they go to a water source that has salmonella and E. coli riddled through it. Now you just decrease their health. Now they get bit by the bug, they have more of a chance to die as well. So it's all about total herd health too. So yeah, we're not killing the midge per se. Like the products are in here, they're not a pesticide, they're not a larvicide, not a bacterial side. Because for one, I just don't trust everybody having that in their hands because no one knows how to read a label. But with that said, it's all natural products that do restore the ecosystem. So, for instance, like the one part of it is called demuck. It's a pelletized bacteria that actually reduces your organic sediment in your ponds. And that's why I always like getting going early before we get drought conditions to reduce as much as you can. In one of my case studies that I did in my time as biologist, we reduced the muck by 7.21 inches. And that was all pure organics. Well, when you think if you have a 10-story house and you take 7 stories away, it reduces a lot of spot for the midge to grow.
Yeah, you're talking about like reducing that muck. It's bacteria. It's like, gosh, what's an analogy? It's Rid-X. You put Rid-X down your toilet every month and it puts this bacteria into your septic tank and it reduces your solids. You're basically sending bacteria down there to eat up your poop. And that's basically what you're talking about doing in a pond. You're putting some bacteria into that water source, and that bacteria is going to consume all that organic matter at the bottom of your pond.
Yeah. So, for instance, like I have a client property not far from here because I do land management, and he had a pond I built about probably 10 years ago now. And it was gravel filled essentially. It was a line pond. And over time, I couldn't see that gravel anymore. So these last 2 years, I've been using that product. Now you can see the gravel again. So we're reducing that. So now if you reduce that, and it's just non-organics, there is no food for the midge anymore. So that's the biggest goal is like people that say, yeah, they live in mud flats, but also if that mud flat doesn't exist in the first place when the drought occurs, you don't have the issues. But also and even on flip side of the product too, is it goes hand in hand when you do even put new ponds in. Get them established. Start treating them ASAP, right out of the gate. Now there's some ponds I'll say, like I was out on Lee Lukoski's property this year, and there was one pond that was so bad where it's like, nope, get rid of it. You're actually doing. It'll take you too long to fix some ponds, and I'm going to be honest on that. It's going to take too long on some ponds where you're better off digging them out, bulldozing them in, whatever it might be, and then establishing new quality water sources somewhere else on the property, closer to bedding sources, away from these creek systems where we're finding them all dead, or river systems, because unfortunately no one restores them anymore. And ultimately, to me, the biology is so sound. So for instance, one of my clients is actually the Milwaukee County Zoo, and we reduced their phosphorus levels from 600 part per billion down to 70 parts per billion. I mean, that's a crazy drastic decrease of nutrients. Well, nutrients is what impairs water sources. We like green food plots. We don't want green ponds. And because the worse the pond condition, the less, once again, you have of these predators.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned one thing. There's your product. There's 3 different components, right? It's a system. There's basically 3 things that work together. Uh, Quickly explain that to us, and then yeah, like how quickly can you see some results? You talked about the fact like, hey, it's almost opening day now and this outbreak is like raging like wildfire. It probably would have been better had everybody started to use this stuff in the spring, but it's too late now. Like how much impact can we really have? Can we really, save deer or bring this to a conclusion, sooner than it would on its own, which, like you said, is going to be waiting for the first killing frost of fall.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, riskly. I mean, when you come down to it, and so there's 3 components. First component is called catapult. So it's a biocatalyst, and all a biocatalyst does in nature is it speeds up a biological process. In this case, it's speeding up organic decomposition within the water and within the sediment water interface. So we want to start breaking it down into simple sugars, into different usable forms of nutrients for bacteria, and it also is a natural degreaser. So if you ever see that like slime layer that goes on a pond, that'll break all that down as well, because that's a lot of times like silicas and different organics that are just from decay. Then the next part of it is actually a water soluble pouch that you just toss in water. It's super simple. It dissolves, falls into the pond, starts circulating, and it's called live water. And what that is the true beneficial aerobic bacteria, and that's going to start feeding on all the organic matter within the water column, but it's also going to turn your nutrients into unusable forms, and it's going to provide essentially this biota to restore that ecosystem, get it living, breathing again, get oxygen back in the water. Then the last part of it is the demuck I talked about briefly, which is the pelletized bacteria. And it's more of a benthic aerobic bacteria, but that's focusing on the actual muck reduction. So that's what I always call the heavy lifter of the program, where that's something you want to be on top of, just because it does take a little bit longer to get rid of the muck than, let's say, clearing up the water itself. And the kit's based on 5 months of application, and that's based kind of on me being up here in Wisconsin, knowing what my treatment schedule was. Now you get, let's say, Southern Ohio, Kentucky, stuff like that. You might have to treat longer. And usually, kind of what I use as a rule of thumb is kind of when we usually get to fall, that's usually when you start stopping your treatments. So like in Ohio, for instance, like where the red zone is, to me, you'd still technically have 2 to 3 months of possible treatments there. So you have enough time to make an impact on your water for, especially, I mean, let's be honest, for the deer that are surviving. We want to do what we can to protect what's little left. And so you'll have 2-3 months of application, and then that product does carry into the next year. It has a 3 to 5 year shelf life as well.
Now, Emily, I'm curious. I tell you what, I'm seeing a lot amongst the deer hunters, in Ohio, as I look at things on social media, is I'm seeing a lot of like anger at the DNR because they feel like the DNR doesn't care. Now, I don't want to completely throw the DNR under the bus only because they don't have anybody here to defend themselves. My guess is that they would say that there's not that much they could do. I'm curious. I'll circle back to Zach a little later and ask him if that's actually the case, because I have to wonder as I listen to Zach explain all this stuff. I'm like, man, is this like, could we develop like treatments where you could fly and apply this stuff to water sources on a more regionalized basis, in areas that are susceptible to EHD outbreaks? I know, like here in Pennsylvania, the DCNR will do that, putting out some, I think it's bacteria for gypsy moth, and they'll spray the oak forest and put out these bacteria that'll prevent, the gypsy moth, eggs, I guess, from developing or whatever. And I wonder, might in the future, might we see something similar? But before we get into that, like, Emily, tell me about sort of the emotional, mental temperature of your hunting community there, and like what are you looking for? What do you want to see out of the DNR in terms of like level of concern relative to what it is now, in your opinion?
So yeah, everybody's pretty fired up just because, they feel like the ODNR is not doing anything. Really, this late in the game, they really can't do anything. And unfortunately, in Ohio, all these regulations and bag limits and stuff, they go through legislation way ahead of time, and they're already set in stone. So, right now, there's nothing that's going to change for this fall. There's nothing that's going to change for out of state, tags. There's nothing that's going to change for bag limits. We still have our full capacity bag limit, just as we've had in other years, which really frustrates people. But with how things work, things have to go through a legislation process, and it's not like they can really go in and change those things, I don't believe, even though as much as we want it to happen, as much as I want it to happen. In these areas, to be 100% honest, we don't even need to be hunting this year because there's literally nothing left in these counties. We're kind of hoping that for next year, because we're pushing it so much for everybody to report their deer online to the link to the ODNR so they see how bad it is, that hopefully next year, they'll adjust bag limits. They'll put out-of-staters on a draw instead of letting it be a free-for-all, or do something different. But we don't even know if that's going to happen. And just like Zach said, the DNR just posted a thing where they're really only concerned about the CWD right now, and they're talking about CWD when in the end the EHD is what's completely devastating this area, but they're not talking about that. So everybody's getting really frustrated and emotional when things aren't changing and stuff like that. And we kind of battle in this state because we also have like one of the largest interstate systems, which my husband is a state trooper, and he kind of knows more information on the background of this as well. And the insurance companies are, on the DNR and everything too, on, keeping the deer numbers way down because of all the insurance claims. So you have a lot of things like working against us right now that we can't really control. But yeah, the frustration is really high. It's really high for me as well, just because we do have so many out-of-staters that come here, and that's why I'm trying to like inform these out-of-staters, like, hey, we don't have deer here. You know, you may want to go to a different area or something like that, because we don't have the deer numbers even for the locals right now. So
Yeah, that's something where honestly now, as an out-of-state deer hunter, I'm one of those nasty Pennsylvanians that comes over there every year and shoots your deer. But like, I think to a certain degree, it's going to be self-regulating, Emily, because, like I have cameras up over there, at Clint's, and of course I'll be talking to him, and like, if all those deer die, which so far I'm still seeing a lot of deer on the cameras, but like, you don't know. It could literally change, in a couple of days. I'm not going to come over there. I just booked my Airbnb to come out there for a week in November and hunt. But if there's no deer, I don't care if your season's open or not. I mean, I'm just not going to spend the money on the non-resident license and take a week, right? And go there, because like you said, I'll pivot, I'll go down, to Kentucky, or I'll go out to, Illinois or somewhere where it hasn't been hit as hard, and try to find a quality hunt. Um, so, I do think, sort of from a biological standpoint, if I was a biologist, Zach, and and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night, and I don't have any degrees, but I would say this. I would say, if I was, let's say, a biologist, I'd say it really doesn't matter like how much of a season we offer, or how many like tags we make available to non-residents, because if there's only 6 deer left in the area, they're probably not going to all get killed anyway. Like, guys are going to give up. If you go out for 4 or 5 days in a row and you don't see a deer, they're just going to stop coming. And maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, is the DNR doing anything, Emily, in terms of even like public outreach? I know they've got this map and people are submitting reports. Are they having like public meetings? Are they putting out like a weekly bulletin? What's going on?
I don't really know 100% of exactly what all they're doing. I'm not really seeing much. Yes, they did share, for folks that's seeing sick deer or finding dead deer to report to this link. But beyond that, I'm not really seeing much talk from the ODNR or anything about it at all. So that's why, like, myself personally, on all my social channels, especially on Instagram and things like that, like, I'm trying to push this out there so people make sure that they report everything they're finding, because a lot of people were finding dead deer and they weren't even reporting them. So it's like, well, how's the ODNR really going to realize how bad this is unless we get everybody to make sure they put the effort for it and report all those dead deer, so they really know, like, okay, this is like really bad. We may need to change something, especially for these counties, like the following year or something. So I don't know. We can only hope, but I really don't feel like there's much. I know there's talk about it, but I don't really feel like there's much talk about it. Like I said, they're still kind of focusing on the chronic wasting disease, which really is not the issue right now.
No matter where your pursuits take you, no matter the quarry, there's always an element of chance.
Deer, deer.
But skill is more reliable than luck.
I feel like we're in a pretty good position. We're just gonna have to wait.
The most trusted archery authority, Bowhunter TV. Watch now on Outdoor Channel, Sportsman Channel, and My Outdoor TV.
And I don't want to get too deep into CWD, Zach, but just real quick, right? Obviously, most everybody's heard about chronic wasting disease, and it's much different in terms of what it is, the way that uh it's transmitted, and the way that it takes a long period of time eventually to show symptom in the deer. But it can definitely have an impact on a very long, years long sort of basis within a deer population. But and the agencies are obviously, we've seen all the regulations, whether it's getting rid of like the ability to use deer urines and feeding bans and increased harvests and wide scale testing. So the state agencies are putting in all these things, to try to manage CWD, which, by the way, I'll just point out so far, absolutely nothing that anybody has done has shown any honest to God ability to slow the spread, stop the spread. And my question to every agency out there, and this is an open invitation for every CWD biologist and researcher out there to come on the show anytime. I'd be glad to have the discussion. My question to you is going to be, what are you going to do when CWD is every single place in the whitetail range? When your CWD map is the entire whitetail range, what are going to be your regulations and how many restrictions are you going to put on us? And how many new rules are you going to try and put in place when it's already spread everywhere and it's totally endemic in the whitetail population? Because unless you find something soon, you're literally just spitting into the wind with everything that you've been doing. Okay, my rant on CWD is over, but come back to EHD. Now, here's something that we know is having an impact. How about, Zach, is there something that could be done? Could these state agencies, could these conservation organizations, could you get the National Deer Association, Whitetails Unlimited, not only on the state agency level from a government standpoint, but to actually start outreach to the private landowners and the leaseholders and the individual hunters like you and I to say, hey, maybe your state's not doing anything, or maybe they are, but maybe you can help. Whether they are or they aren't, here's what you can do on your property. And could we actually have a landscape level impact on how frequently and how severe these EHD outbreaks are?
Yes, I mean, so like I actually reached out to Ohio Division of Wildlife and got no response. So not surprised, but I wanted to talk to their biologist to actually discuss, hey, what are ways we can fix this? Because like I even did my own personal post, like, all right, here's an emergency item list. What you guys can do on your properties to fix it. Why there is nothing like that put out yet blows my mind. It just means that they're looking left while we're all looking right. And yeah, because the CWD thing, like we're the epic center right in Wisconsin. We all started this whole craziness with CWD here. It's not the issue. All right, we might lose 20 deer a year to that, whereas we're losing 80% of our herd in a region like Emily was saying by her. So where I do think we could see success is, like you said, more our wildlife agencies. Your NDA, your Pheasants Forever, NWTF. I mean, because and yeah, even though those aren't deer organizations, but we all have to come together to fix this because obviously hunters as a whole, we all are working together at the same thing of just saving our wildlife and protecting our habitats, right? So I do think there would be potential there where we could work together with agencies like that. The government wise, unfortunately, like I dealt with this world for 20 years where we would find a new herbicide, for instance, that would fix an invasive species issue, but then they would want to get 10 to 20 years of study before ever implementing something. Well, and to me, all right, if you wait that long, the problem is already there and it's already taken over. And that's where I see a lot of that with our more government state agencies is they want so much laboratory results, which to me mean little to nothing. To me, it's all field experience that really makes the needle move. But there are some things out there that could be researched. I mean, for instance, like I'm doing my own research on my time to figure out EHD on the aquatic level. And this has just been my ongoing research for over a decade. And it's my own time, but with that said, there's other things we could be looking at. Is there, fogging systems? Is there a larvicide that could be selective? Because there is some stuff out there, I will say, there's some stuff you can treat water with right now and edges of wetlands but are non-selective, which we don't want to do either because we don't want to kill our native insects and invertebrates and amphibians and all that kind of stuff either. But none of that's getting researched either to find that selective larvicide, bacterial side. That's where I think we need to put our focus into. Because if someone could go out there and let's just say fog, a creek bottom, they just got to walk their creek and take one of those little mosquito foggers and walk it. I bet you a lot of people, and Emily probably going to test this, but I think a lot of people in those areas affected would be like, yeah, I'm going to do that because I don't want to deal with all the dead deer again. But none of that's getting researched. So like I said, I know of some stuff just because of my world I lived in with aquatics and my colleagues I knew and professionals I knew. But like I said, kind of circle this all back to your original thing, Christian, is I do think there is a possibility where we could see help on our wildlife side of things with our organizations, these nonprofits and things that way.
Now, and what about this, Zach? Like, obviously, your phone, your website, right? It's all getting bombarded right now because this is the hot topic. But people are going to want to know how much, like your product, how much does it cost? And like you said, your kit maybe is about, enough to treat for 5 months, but that kind of depends on how much water you have to treat and all that. So just give people a sense. And do you even have any left, or did you run it? Because you just introduced this year, right? So like you didn't know how much. I mean, it's anybody. You've got a new widget, you know what I mean? And you're bringing a new widget to market. How many widgets do you build? Because if you don't build enough, you sell out real fast. And if you build too many and you sell half of them, you're still out money because you didn't recoup all your manufacturing costs. So do you even have EHD fence for somebody who needs it right now?
Yes, we do. So what's nice is I work very closely with the company that I research these products with. So we have a very quick turnaround, even if we do run out, to build a new supply. I mean, like a week turnaround to get this all a whole new supply in. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like so our product it ends up being like for instance, so I was kind of take one of my properties I manage, for instance. It has 3 ponds on it that are probably all 30 foot in diameter, right? Small wildlife ponds. I've been managing that property all season from April until now with roughly 2 kits. And I just keep them in my four-wheeler, my tractor, and I take care of it. So it's costing my client about like $50 a month to take care of his ponds and to make sure he has good, clean water. So to me, when I think of my own cell camera, just
So it's the cost. So it's, yeah, I was gonna say it's the cost of a couple cellular cameras to keep your deer alive potentially.
talk about costs and you think of like how much it is to put food plots in place, to do TSI work, to do all this stuff. It's super expensive. But yeah, like my cellular camera plan, I mean, there's a reason why my wife doesn't know what it is. But with that said, it's such a nominal fee to potentially save your herd, right? So yeah, it's not a silver bullet. I'm not going to say it is. And because like me, that's my researching mind is I always want to find the next thing. I always want to find the next product. That's just how my mind is geared as a biologist. I always think there's something better out there. It's maybe not been discovered yet or whatever. So I'm always working towards the next thing. But to me, this is a means to start saving our deer herd because if people are like me that are watching, listening, if I have a big deer on my property, I want to do whatever it takes to make sure he lives. But in turn, I have nephews, I have a son, I have a daughter. I want to make sure they have that resource for when I'm old and gray, they can hunt their animals. That's more important to me than anything because yeah, big deer are cool. All right, but what about that fork horn? What about that doe? All the deer matter at the end of the day. And so, like, even for on this whole deal, right? That's why, like, and it was kind of ironic the CWD thing for ODNR is on Tuesday the 9th because prior to them saying that, I'm actually doing a live Q&A on EHD on our page, and also on the Tuesday the 9th. So that's what we're trying to do also as outreach is just I want to provide as much biology and science out there. Yes, the product is part of that, but there's so many other portions of aquatic biology that need to be incorporated in these properties. And that's why actually I'm going to Ohio next week on a consult just for that reason to help a guy with his property that he had EHD issues.
Well, it's all extremely interesting. And unfortunately, as Zach said, like there's no magic bullet for right now. And the damage that's been done in these areas, it's not going to be undone because dead is dead. And so you're looking at like 5 to 10 years for things to recover. So it kind of brings me full circle, Emily, back to where we started. You've been dealt this really difficult blow, and like you said, all your target bucks are dead. I know you. You're about the hardest hunting deer hunter, that I know, and I can't imagine that you're just going to say, "Well, I had a bunch of deer die in my area, and so I'm just not going to hunt this fall." So what are you going to do? And how are you going to deal with this personally? You, not only you, but all of the deer hunters in your area. Like, are you going to now, load up the truck and head elsewhere, or what?
I mean, you know me well enough. It's kind of one of those things that, I'm a big advocate of, having history with a deer and knowing how old a deer is and targeting that deer. And that's really what means the most to me. And so unfortunately, me along with the rest of the locals, I mean, we're just taking it upon ourselves where we're just not going to be hunting here because, there is nothing to hunt. And if we do have a 2-year-old, that is still alive, we need to try to make sure that he stays alive to breed some does because that may be the only buck, the only buck that we have left. Same with the does. We're not going to be able to shoot anything for meat, which a lot of us rely on, myself included. So, we're not even going to have that meat to put in the freezer. And, it's kind of one of the things that Ohio is a cheap state for people to come hunt. And unfortunately, all the other states, Illinois and stuff like that, they're pretty costly for an out of stater to go and hunt. And I've never hunted out of state for whitetails just because I'm so focused on getting history with the deer and killing a deer here. I don't really know how I feel about just going out of state and paying money just to try to shoot a deer. And it's one of those things that it would have to be a giant for me to even pull the trigger at the same time. So I just really don't know. I don't really have a plan and don't really have answers. And kind of had a question for Zach there too, because most of the areas here, so we don't have ponds, which is the thing. They're all ravines and streams and creeks. It's holding little pockets of water and mud and different things like that because we're in steep terrain here. So it's like what can we even do because we don't even have like ponds to treat. That's not where the deer are getting infected here. So it's like what should all of us be doing and for future, or is it one of them things that we should be creating these water holes and ponds and then treating them to try to draw the deer into those areas to where they stay away from the other areas? I'm kind of not really sure what we should do from here on.
Yeah, and honestly, to answer there, Emily, you're spot on. So first of all, I mean, one to me to emerge a situation like when you said you have a 1 2-year-old left, to me is getting water sources up close to their bedding, get it away from where the deer are going down and getting these midges. So to me, that's priority A, is get quality water closer to where the deer want to be. If they want to be bedded on a ridge or a knoll, get water right next to them. A big deer is a lazy deer, and a healthy deer is also a lazy deer. They want to stay as tight as they can to wherever they need. So that's part of it. But then honestly, and the thing too is looking at those streams, look at the problematic areas where there is a lot of muck, for instance. These are things where getting aquatic plants actually put into your stream beds to start filtering the water, looking above where maybe runoff's coming in, trying to filter that. So that's a bigger project, right? I mean, to actually do stream restoration, all that. But to me, that's something you have to look at. Or where's an agricultural field run into a stream? But you got to kind of nip the problem for the streams in the butt, just to fix it first. But to me, priority A, no matter what, is get these water holes, get these treatments. Like I actually just talked to one of my buddies down in Kentucky where he's worried. So he just buried 200-300-gallon totes of water and he treated with the EHD-fense. He's like, I already have deer on it. They're drinking out of it. Perfect. So even like, my own ponds that I manage for across the Midwest, like I have guys, if they have a pond that's like, it's looking pretty bad because it's a drought, they're putting in tanks. Even like I said, when I was at Lee Dukowski's property, he got rid of a pond that was absolute crap. And then he went up the hill into his food plot and he put one of those, like, I think it's called Grizzly. Grizzly makes it. It's like a 150-gallon tank. He put one way up in the food plot where deer could feed and drink. And now they're up and away from that pond source where midge problems could be. So to me, that'd be a huge, for every property. I mean, every property should be trying to put added water, and it's actually water that deer typically prefer anyways. Because if the creek system's already having an issue with EHD, it means that obviously there's too much organics in that creek system. It's not a nice gravel bed creek that's clean, fresh, quality water. It might look like it, might be clear looking, but ultimately when it pools up, it gets stagnant, it gets gross. And if there's organics, the midge will live there. So yeah, 100%, just after my ramble here, but I would say get water above, up and away from those creek, river, stream systems.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, because it's kind of one of the things that I know a lot of local people will probably be watching this and are kind of wondering, what they can do. So in other words, myself and others, we need to try to create, whether it's using one of those grizzly tubs or the different, little plastic pond systems or something that some of these other, hunters and stuff are using and companies make, just to get fresh water there where the deer spend most of their time. That way they're not going other places and getting infected. That way they can hopefully just go from the food, the water, and the bedding, and they're not traveling, down in those nasty places where, they're getting infected by those midges.
Absolutely.
Well, I tell you, this, we're coming up on just under an hour, and the time has flown. There's been a lot of really good information. And unfortunately, like we said at the beginning, not under the greatest of circumstances, but I do have a silver lining for you, Emily, here. This is the year. Maybe this is the year that you come over to Pennsylvania. Nobody ever comes to Pennsylvania to hunt, but we have a lot of does. As a matter of fact, I just have a text I haven't looked at it, but one of my farmer friends from church, he's getting me onto some of his properties this year, because he was telling me he thinks he's losing 20% of his profit to whitetails. And so I was like, yeah, if you give a tithe at church and you're giving 10% to the church, but you're giving 20% to the deer, that's a little bit hard to take, so you come on over and shoot some does. And I got a nice guest room downstairs. Bring your husband. My wife and I will entertain you in the evening, and you can fill your freezer. You don't have to feel guilty about it. You'll make farmers happy over here. Come on.
Yeah, hey, I don't mind shooting some does. I know my mom, she relies on meat in the freezer and stuff like that. So I always try to kill, a couple deer a year. And I mean, it's all we've been eating is deer meat. So that's one thing about it. We're not going to be able to have that luxury this year because we can't afford to shoot anything here. So.
Well, that's been my running joke for years. I always invite everybody to come to Pennsylvania. Nobody in the industry ever wants to come to PA. So this might be the year I can convince some Ohio people, and it's not just a one-way street. You guys can come over here, and we have those affordable over-the-counter non-resident licenses just like you do in Ohio. So, don't never say never, Emily. And Zach, I wish you continued success. It sounds like, this is something with, like you said, EHD is getting to be such an annual issue, thankfully not in the same area every year, although part of that is just the fact that once you've had a bad EHD outbreak, you've reduced deer density to an extent that the likelihood of another severe outbreak like that is unlikely, because there aren't the deer to kill because they're already dead. But the point is, not just you, right? More hunters individually, more groups on the nonprofit conservation groups, more state agencies are going to start thinking man, is there a way we can start to adopt some best practices from a habitat management standpoint to maybe reduce the frequency of this going forward?
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of those things. I think it's the social media has helped us, at least, to make finally the light of it, right? If we didn't have this modern day age, I don't think we'd still be aware of it, but ultimately it's one of those things too, like on my behalf too, like anyone out there that's listening and watching, I mean, I'm more than happy to answer questions. And that's why we're holding that live Q&A on September 9th. Is you have a question or how to fix it. And I actually have an article I'm going to be posting here shortly about how even to restore and fix creek systems. So I just got to finish writing that here once I get some free time. But ultimately, I encourage everyone to reach out. I mean, that's my cup of tea. Like I said, I'm a water nerd. So you want to talk water, I'm more on board to talk to anyone, and that includes agencies. I mean, if a biologist wants to talk to me about it, I'm game. I mean, I like doing podcasts. I like talking. So that said, I mean, just don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and obviously, like you said, you've got the Facebook page for EHD-fense, and then you've got the website as well. Why don't you just tell everybody what the website is?
Yeah, so the website is www.ehd-fense.com, and fence is spelled like defense like football. So EHD-fense.com. But I have an article on there. Actually, the product right now, just with the epidemic going on, we have it 20% off as well, just so people can get in their hands.
All right. Well, Emily and Zach, I really appreciate your time. I think it was, more than worthwhile, and hopefully, we see this, not get too much worse than it already is. But if nothing else, it's getting everybody's attention, and longer term, hopefully we see some good come out of this. So I wish you both the best. I don't know what that means, Emily, for you, but somehow, some way, I know you're gonna figure something out.
Everything always works out as it's meant to be, even though sometimes it doesn't seem that way. But
Yeah. Well, thanks again, guys, and have a good rest of your day.
yep,
You as
thank
well.
you.
Thanks for downloading the Bow Hunter Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Pick up the latest issue of Bow Hunter magazine on your local newsstand or connect with us online at bowhunter.com.